Today marks the third anniversary of the worst mass shooting in modern U.S. history. On October 1st, 2017, Stephen Paddock, a reclusive 64-year-old gambler, opened fire on a crowd gathered for a country music festival on the Las Vegas Strip. 58 people were killed. Nearly 700 people were wounded.
Yesterday, a judge approved an $800 million settlement for the victims and their families. Joining us now is civil rights and defense attorney Brian Claypool. He is a survivor of that shooting and represents 150 victims in the class action lawsuit against the owners of Mandalay Bay Casino and Resort. Brian, we thank you for being with us. We know today must be a difficult day for you, marking the third anniversary. If you could, share what some of the specific details are of this settlement, who will be compensated, how much and when.
Yeah, hi, Jessica and Frank. Thanks for having me, and good seeing you again, and thank you for covering this story. So there were about 4,400 victims that came forward to file claims against MGM. We represent 150 of those. So it was a long and complicated process to get us where we're at. First, we had to negotiate with lawyers for MGM and then lawyers for over 20 insurance companies for MGM to come up with the amount of money that was put together, the $800 million that you're showing now. Of that $800 million, about $50 million will be paid by MGM out of their own pocket. The rest of it's insurance. But in terms of the recovery for the victims, a claims administration company had to create what's called categories of injuries first. So for example, we represent the mom of a young man who was killed. So she would be in the death category. Then you had shooting victim category. Then that was even broken down into serious shooting would be category A, minor shooting B. Then you had what's called trampling cases. We have quite a few of those, where a lot of victims were actually trampled, had surgery, lost work, some are disabled. And then you get into the category of what I am, which is PTSD, having treated with a therapist, and then PTSD with no treatment. Those were the categories, and then the ranges of recovery were determined as well through a point system and what's called enhancement factors. For example, somebody who's permanently disabled, somebody who spent more than 10 days in the hospital, or who lost a lot of income. And then there is a process for appealing. So you get an award, that's coming out shortly, and then you have an appeal process, and then the final award should come out probably sometime the end of November, early December.
This was such a horrific event. You know better than anyone, having lived through this. But you wonder, how could Mandalay Bay be blamed for it? They didn't participate in this, but you say that they could have taken measures to prevent a mass shooting on their property. How so?
Well, Frank, look, this case for me personally has always been about bringing about social change and reform. Oftentimes, litigation is a vehicle to bring about change. I'll never forget the 58 precious souls who died, their families who were impacted, those injured, those shot, and myself, people like me and others with PTSD. I'll never forget any of this. And the reason why we brought this lawsuit is because Mandalay Bay had inept security. They should have recognized Paddock bringing up all these bags, by the way, in a freight elevator. So they broke the rules there. Anybody with a set of eyes and ears would have seen that this guy was suspicious and would have done something about it to preempt the shooting. Also, there were no cameras in the hallways at the Mandalay Bay. That's categorically reckless. Also, the windows were not equipped with alarm systems, so that when Paddock was drilling in the window, it would have triggered an alarm. That's just the tip of the iceberg. But the biggest hurdle we had to overcome, Frank, was this reasonably foreseeable for Mandalay Bay to suspect that somebody would shoot individuals across the street? Because you made a good point. Usually you can't recover if the shooting involves somebody not on your premise. But the lawyers in this case, including myself, we were able to find that a couple of years prior to the shooting, a man was arrested, an ex-felon was arrested on a high floor of the Mandalay Bay, pointing an assault weapon at the Vegas Strip.
Wow.
So that was a game changer in this case.
And Brian, you had said that, MGM Resorts International, Mandalay's parent company, had re-traumatized victims during this failed attempt to shield itself from liability under a federal law. Could you explain that for us?
Yeah, what MGM did in this case is in the middle well, actually, ironically, before we even filed all the lawsuits, lawyers for MGM went out and sued, thousands of victims under what's called the Safety Act. They were basically arguing that if there was any connection to a terroristic act, that under this federal law that went into place after tragedy 9/11, that the MGM and security would be exempt from any civil liability. So that was lurching over all the victims' heads, and that created really a re-traumatizing, because we're all trying to get through this and navigate through it. Then all of a sudden you're having to deal with a lawsuit.
Right.
But one other thought I had before we finish is, look, this case might be over in December. What payouts hopefully will be by the end of the year, and the courtroom lights are going to go off. But I've made it a mission that this will continue onward. The jury in this case is going to be out for many years to come to monitor and make sure that companies like MGM improve security, other businesses improve security. This is a learning lesson, and I'm not going to stop in this matter until we have the change we need, including an assault weapon ban as well.
Well, Brian, as Jessica said, our thoughts are with you and other survivors and the families of those who didn't. We know this is a very difficult day for you, and we thank you for joining us on this day. Once again, Brian Claypool, civil rights and defense attorney and a survivor of the Las Vegas mass shooting.